Thank you. I really enjoy doing this. And, really enjoy talking to people who I can envision myself back in, believe it or not, 1968, where you are right now. So I've been in this, my career has been all in the financial services business. Everything from trading to management at all levels to include corporate syndicate, which is IPOs, insurance, all in the industry, some on the product side, some on the sales side, and some on the staff support side. I've been in the real estate business over and above that, which I thought I'd mention. The first business I ever started, I was a graduate student at the Wharton School, getting my MBA. My wife of 58 years, was a teacher, and we started a little tiny investment firm, a real estate investment business, which continues today. So I think if I can encourage all of you to think in terms of the long term. My book is titled Investing Ahead, but I think right now you're probably thinking more about what you're doing when you graduate, the near term. And I think if the one thing I can leave with you is I've always been a long-term thinker, more strategic long-term, and I was born that way. So tactically, I've never really been too concerned about short-term success or failure. My short-term successes, I think, there are a few of them, but I think everything I did and have done and continue to want to do, by the way, is what I've learned. And I like to say that I've learned more from my failures than I have my successes. I think as you look out on your careers in financial services or whatever it is you choose to do, much of your career, your life is going to be defined by how you learn and how you handle failure. Handling success is also important, don't get me wrong. That can be trouble too. You can feel at times that you're the smartest person on the face of the earth. I'd caution you, don't get over that as quickly as you can. That things are going right, and when you're in that part of your life, when everything's going right, it's a wonderful feeling. But what I've learned is that things go really, really right sometimes. And I always like to say, that's when I put my crash helmet on, because I know I need to get ready for coming off that. And when things are going really, really wrong, and this is what only time and experience, and you can only learn that over the long term. So we all get in those periods when things aren't going right. That's when you really have to sum up your courage, your confidence, everything you can find. I promise you that if you sustain that and can kind of keep your sensibilities about you, you'll come through those periods, and you'll come through them better. Potentially that's what'll happen. So I think a long-term career depends on how you handle success, what you learn on a day-to-day basis, and how you handle that time when things aren't going well. No matter how smart you are, no matter how good you are, no matter, you're going to have those times when you're going to have to fight through failure. And so the real estate business was the first thing I started. And I have a tendency to be, as I said, long-term. So my first goal, well, I shouldn't say my first goal, but my first real goals were always 10 years. I can't imagine why I ever chose 10 years. Nobody told me to do that, but I did 10 years. And when you get to be my age, which is 80, closer to 81, you look out 10 years, and some of my longer term goals are longer than that. So I'm now living, at least in my projections, to about 110. Now, whether I'll make it or not, we'll see. But sometimes if you focus too much on the short term, it can be very limiting and very dependent on step by step by step. And I'm not saying that's not important. I've got those too. But the really important thing is if you can have a long-term goal that's lofty and gives you time to correct and learn and get back on track, that's that I think is important. My long-term goals were always business related, personal things related. And I think beginning in 68, however many, and I don't adjust them every year either. I leave them in place for the 10 years and then check to see how things are going. But I think I only ever achieved one of them. But they were lofty. They were always lofty. They were always stretches. But I only achieved one. But when I go back and I look at whatever that was, I ask myself, what might it have been if I just took a conventional pedestrian approach to it? And I can tell you in every single case, they were a whole lot higher, even though I failed in that respect, than they would have been had I just gone along. So, I'd urge you to keep that in mind. Your lives and your careers are not going to depend on that first year or so. Be great if you get off to a great start. We all want that. But don't extrapolate that. Don't just annualize it, because there are going to be these peaks and valleys. So the business I'm here to talk about, I think, primarily is the investment business, finance. And I have to tell you that I don't think I've ever mentioned this in any of the talks I've given. I briefly taught at St. Rose. I taught corporate finance in the evening school. And I have to tell you, it was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done in my life. Now, I was much younger in my career, but I got over that because I realized early on it was nice. I enjoyed it. To a degree, I enjoyed it. But it was really one of the toughest things I'd ever done, teaching corporate finance. What I didn't know at the time was that corporate finance was one of those subjects, at least at St. Rose, where a lot of students put it off to the end because it was a little harder than, let's say, accounting or insurance, or pick a subject. I didn't know that. And so I found that when I taught that class in the evening school, I had a fair percentage of full-time students who put it off to the end and came to the evening program, and they met me, and they probably wished that they had not done what they did, because A, I didn't know what I was doing, and B, I'm kind of tough. And I can still remember speaking to them and finding out that some of them had waited. And I don't know why the school allowed it to happen, but in spite of the fact that it was a required course, I had more than a handful of students who waited till the last semester. And I'm not sure if that happens because they transfer major or switch majors, do all that. But don't delay the tough things. Whatever it is, don't delay the tough things. Get them right up front and deal with them as you go along, whether it's an academic program like this or in business. The challenges you face are similar to the challenges I face, because AI is an incredibly disruptive force everywhere. When I would talk about AI a year ago, 2 years ago, it was conceptual. It was totally and completely conceptual. I personally wasn't using it. Most of the people I talked to didn't even know what it was. And to the extent they were using it, it was what I would call pretty, it would be like taking everything we used in terms of a laptop computer 5 years ago and using it to play games. That was the way I would describe it. And in a very brief period of time, I'm coming to understand that it's raising the level of expectation for all of us. So, from an AI point of view, I think from a business point of view, let's start there. My competitors who effectively use AI to raise the bar, the standard for what it is they're trying to achieve, are going to be so far ahead of the way we would have attacked a problem or a challenge going forward compared to a year or two ago. If I thought I had to run fast a year or two ago, I'm going to have to run a lot faster. But the good news is AI does a lot of it. I'll give you a couple examples. One of the goals I have is to take our intellectual property and create another entity. There are a lot of tax reasons for doing that. Like, for example, the book, whatever this value is attached to the book, and other intellectual property that we have, our investment process, for example, any patents we hold. The idea is you take your intellectual property and you create a business that owns the property. Now, why do you do that? Well, let's say the book, for example. If the book is owned by another company, my company, we have to pay for the rights to use that. Now, I don't know how many of you are taking accounting, but the one thing accounting taught me is it doesn't really matter how much you make. What matters is how much you keep. What you keep is what's important. And then what's important is what you do with what you keep. Okay, so now you have a business. We have property that we're estimating, if we were to buy it, would cost about $300,000 a year. So by buying it from ourselves, in effect, from one pocket to the other, what we start out with is a property that we own. That's the end of it. Now we're going to have a property that we own, but we own it in another business. Call it Ajax. So obviously I need an investment process. I need the book. So I buy the rights. That becomes an income tax deduction for my business. A deduction we wouldn't have gotten. So let's just say that we pay $300,000 for the rights to that. And we're a C Corp, so we pay tax at 21%. The maximum New York State tax is 6% on a corporation. That's 21 plus 6, let's call it 27%. So that dollar that would have been reduced inside the business by 27% is now $1. Now some of it's in the business, the primary business, and some of it's over here, but it's still $1. This business over here is so small that it doesn't really have to pay much in the way of taxes. So you recover it. Now, if you were looking at that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that would be the beginning and the end of the story. It might be complicated. It might be a little fuzzy. And why do we do that? AI will tell you why you do that in about 30 seconds. And it'll lay it all out for you. So if you're in business and you're trying to figure something out and your competitors are trying to do it the old-fashioned way and you're doing it in 30 seconds, that might sound, well, I'm going to beat them all day long, and you will, but eventually more and more of them are going to gain, and they're going to speed up what may have taken months and months and maybe even a year to do. That'll be the new threshold. And those who play the game using the tools that we have are going to be able to compete, but those who don't are going to have a great deal of difficulty. So let's take that a little bit further. Traditionally, what would have happened is myself, a group of management types say, how can we do this? How can we make this happen? You go through a whole series of events to make it happen. And it might take months. It might even take a year. So it speeds it up. Not necessarily the last step, not the goal. It speeds it up. So the question then becomes for all of us, whether you're coming into the workforce or running a business, how can you play that game? How do you get there? That's my challenge, and that's your challenge too. So not too long ago, let's say I wanted to do that, I might go to some kind of let's say a research analyst, or somebody that provides the background for that, and they would then take that challenge and they would do it the old-fashioned way. It'd take a long time. So now the challenge isn't necessarily doing it, it's taking what you can get very quickly and then taking it to the final stage and being able to put more and more challenges in front of you without getting buried in the weeds. That's the world that's changing. That's my world that's changing. That's your world that's changing. I love that. I love that. But I don't love it because of anything that I did. It's just the way I'm built. If you're not built that way, you got to somehow embrace that. You can make, and I can too, but we can make fun of our parents who seem to be old-fashioned or whatever. Well, if you're not careful in today's world, you can be 28 years old and old-fashioned. You can be a dinosaur in a matter of years, or not. I had my first computer put on my desk in around 1993. First one. I had no idea what it was. I thought it was a big old typewriter, really. It weighed about as much as a typewriter would have in those days. And that was my introduction to technology. And everything that was being told to me at the time was, I had no idea what they were talking about. People come in and say, well, this is coming off the hard drive and that's off the server. And everything we had to do back in those days, we're only talking about 30 years, 35 years, is now happening in months. When you stop and think, when I look at my 10-year-old grandson versus the one who's about to be born, and consider what the younger one, the one to be born, is going to be introduced to versus the one who's 11, it's the difference between night and day. That's what's happening. It's happening so fast that you are at a point in your life when it's just a natural thing for you to keep up with. It's the way it is. Believe me, when that computer was put on my desk in 1995, that was not part of my life. I had to call the help desk constantly. But what happened was, what's a help desk? What's a help desk? You don't know that. But in the early days, we had these help desks and you were calling them, how do I shift? Where's a key? We're talking about really, how do I dial up? Well, what's dial up? None of these things, even, you don't know what they are. So you're now at the sweet spot when you're right in the middle of it. If all you're using it for is social media and fun and games, get over it. One of the things I've found is there's a challenge. And I might be working with different people asking different questions. And the ones I believe like you want to be, when something comes up, they're immediately into AI. Immediately. They're not arguing or debating or getting caught up in the weeds when they don't have to be. And others, sadly, a lot, aren't. They're too busy texting their friends, which is the comic book version of technology. If you're not using this magnificent technology to answer questions and get to the bottom line as quickly as you can, you're going to get beaten out by others who are. So there's two sides to this. And you want to make sure that you know as much about the business life side as you do about the social media fun and games side. That's going to be a challenge. I watch the grandson I'm telling you about, and I would say, as a 10, 11-year-old him, it's all about fun and games. I'll say to him, he'll say to me, Granddad, let's take an event. He'll say it's cold outside. And I'll say, well, no, it's not really that cold. And then you get into the conversation that would have occurred 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Why are we debating it? Just go in there and see what the average high-low is. Do it in seconds. Why are you wasting your time? And I'll guarantee you that you do waste a lot of time over things that you don't need to. So you can get to more headier type questions. And that's what I'm urging you to do. That's what you want to do. That's what we have to do in business, and that's what I think you have to do as individuals. So, goals. I would say that don't think in terms of the end game. When I was your age, and I think most people, they think there's some magic attached to being 60 or 65 years old when you pay your dues and you get to that time in your life and now you retire. I'm not sure the world of the future is going to be like that. I don't think it's going to be that way. You're going to live too long. If you stop and think about it, when I was your age, I thought I would be dead at 67 point some odd years, 65 point some odd years. And the reason is that was the life expectancy. So the fact that I'm 80 and past 65 was somewhat of a shock. If you talk to people my age, they will frequently say, I'm the first person where it's not customary for my family to live this long. So when I got to be that old, I was a little surprised. Don't you be surprised. Don't be surprised. That's what you should expect. What does that mean? Well, it means that what you're doing today, you're not doing it with this magical period in time where you go to Florida or Arizona and live for the rest of your life based on what you've done. Because what we do isn't traditionally, I'd be interested to know what the anthropologists say about this, but it's not the way we're wired. When you look at the way we've evolved over time, it's going to take a lot of time for our bodies and the way we're wired to evolve to living as long as we live. So there's going to be no natural event that's going to make you realize that. You're going to have to begin to think through that yourselves to get to that conclusion. So your careers might be a lifelong event. And I'm still trying to do that. But the way we're wired makes it extremely difficult to break through the way we've been programmed to think. So you don't know the answer to this. I don't know the answer to this. What makes an 80-year-old man get up in the morning and want to go to work the way he did or had to do it when they were 20-something? We don't know. Because you're either dead or retired. We don't have a great deal of history or evidence or proof to know how I'm going to do it, let alone how you're going to do it. So, we can go on and on and on about this. And I guess in some ways I wish I talked more specifically about the investment business. But I think the best thing I can do here is stop talking and ask you and challenge me, ask me, well, what am I going to do about something? And let's take it from there. We'll go to questions.
What makes it worth it for you to wake up and go to work every day?
Well, part of it is the way I'm programmed. I'm not about to say that, I'm not going to pound the table and say, I did this and I accomplished that. Yeah, maybe I have, but I'm programmed that way. Okay. Warren Buffett was asked questions frequently that, well, why are you doing this? You got more money. What, do you do it? Well, no, he doesn't do it for the money. I don't really think he does it because he's trying to employ people or anything else. I think he does it because it's his passion. I do it because I enjoy let me take a step back and say the Greek philosophers concluded that we all operate in our personal self-interest. Some of those personal self-interests can be better, more socially palatable than others. But whatever it is, we do it in our self-interest. So I don't get up in the morning ready to go for you or anybody else. I get up in the morning and do it for me. And I hope that what I do benefits a lot of people. Do I employ people? Do I do things that maybe help society? And do I do it better? That's what does it for me. But there are a lot of reasons why you could do that. I don't do it for the money. But when I say that I don't do it for the money, even if what I did was very admirable in the sense that I was maybe out trying to feed the hungry, I still think it comes down to something in us that makes us do that. Not because we're necessarily better or we may appear to be better, but we're doing it because we have that passion. How do you do it every day? So you need to find that passion. Because if you don't, whatever it is you choose to do, if you don't have that something going on that you can't understand, it's going to get tough when you get up that day and things are all going wrong. So it's very, very important to try to find that. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And
I thought I wanted your job.
Well, right. And I think I would have made an okay teacher, but I don't think I had whatever would have been required to do it a long time. That gets me, and this isn't your question, but I'll tell you, you can be a whole lot better at whatever you choose to do if you can sustain it. So if I kept changing my career, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here talking to you. Because there are still things that technology can't do for you and money can't buy. And one of them is the experience that you can gain by being, in the same thing, doing the same thing. I watch my grandson. When you get to be my age, you're really special to your grandparents. You may not know it, but you are. And not that you're not special to your parents, you are, but there's something special about grandparents. But when I was young, I was considered to be a pretty good athlete. I was all Philadelphia in soccer. I was an accomplished baseball player and should have done something there, but that was some issues I had with attitude at the time. When I see what kids today are doing at a very young point in their life, particularly interested in hockey now, what I see my 10-year-old doing in hockey, it's incredible. When I played, kind of like throw the ball out, and the guys who were the most athletically inclined, they were the stars. But it's not because they knew anything, or it's not because they trained. It's not because of any of those things. Today, the really good ones are really, really focused on it. And that's why I say to you, think in terms of a career in baseball or football. What if you decided one day you didn't really want to be a tennis player, you wanted to be a football player at age 18? I'm not saying you can't do that, but you are now behind the curve here. It may not be a big deal in the way you think, but, and I'm not really not in favor of this concentration and focus, but that's the reality of the world we're dealing with. That's what you're dealing with. So it is important. But I do it. I'm happy to say that I lucked out. I just did what I loved. I do it. And I want to continue doing it. I can't imagine not doing anything that I didn't want to do. It's hard. When you're raising a family and forming family formation and all that, you do what you have to do. But one day you have to do what it's no longer that obvious. You have to do what you feel this passion to do. It's different for all of you.
You mentioned you weren't in favor of deep focus or deep concentration.
Mm-hmm.
Could you expand on that?
No, I actually am. No, I mean, I don't like it. No, I agree. In my world, in an ideal world, I'd be able to pick and choose and kind of do all that. But I think the reality is that what I was saying before, what money can't buy and what technology can't really give you instantly, the reality is only time and experience can do. And I think when you're young, you think you have lots of time and lots of experience, a lot of time, and you do. Don't get me wrong, you do. But maybe not as much time as you think, and maybe we don't understand how much time it does to do certain things too. That's a tough one. I'm glad I didn't have to do that. I didn't. Yeah.
You mentioned your time at Wharton. How did your time in graduate school impact your trajectory in business?
Oh my goodness. I got to tell you, I think I learned more. First of all, when I went to Wharton, I had done, my undergraduate work was Drexel University and Temple. When I went to Wharton, my eyes opened up. I was surrounded by some of the brightest, most ambitious, most whatever. I mean, they were alive. I still can't, I think back on it, and I'm still amazed that my friends, they were just so full of determination in life and what they were going to do with their lives. So yes, it did. More than what I learned, I think. I mean, it was a combination of things. And it was also true among the professors, and it was a can-do spirit. Now, we know that a lot of people that went to Wharton aren't so nice by today's standards. You're going to have those in everything, the good and the bad. But I think it was important. Yeah, very, very important.
When you spoke about the importance of, finding a career path, the earlier you find it, the, further you'll get in the long term. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you talked about how you went through a number of different business ventures and, disciplines within business. How do you think the best way is to find your passion and get to that sooner rather than later?
Well, I think, number one, I don't want to give you the impression it's easy. There are a lot of, failures and missteps and all that. I think, you got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest about what you can do, what you don't do because you're afraid of failing or not being able to do it. So you got this kind of thing going on where you want to be a fireman, but you got to kind of outgrow that sort of thing. I think it comes, and you're going to get pressures from parents and friends about what to do, and I would suggest that somehow you got to break through all that and say to yourself and ask yourself, what am I? Where does this passion lie? You're not going to know it. I didn't know what I know now. But I knew that when I got up in the morning, even at a young age, your age is, that's really what got me going. But the challenge is you don't know whether, let's say things don't go wrong or go right. And the whole idea of failure and reality kills your optimism, what you want to do. You got to deal with that too. I think you have to kind of pick who you want to be. Hope that you marry well. I know I told my son when he was dating, and he'd say to me, boy, could have been a man, woman, whatever type situation, but when one is saying about the other, why do they do that? And you go, you know what I'm talking about. And I would say, well, okay, if you're serious about her, don't think for a moment she's going to change. So don't get up tomorrow and bring me the same complaint, because it's not going to change. Now, in that, you've got to decide, well, there's real life. Life is not a walk in the park. So you got to cut through all that and take away what you want versus what is real without becoming cynical and not very much fun to be with. So a lot of what we do in life is really like dating and getting to know someone. And that's not the way life is. What we show at different parts of our life is we get ourselves ready and we do what we have to do for reasons we don't really understand. But we have to cut through that and say, are we prepared to do this for the rest of our life? And the answer is we don't know, but we have to keep pushing and hope for some luck and some, but the reality is, let me just say this. Things aren't going well for me right now, but I've been around the block enough times to know that's not unusual. Why do I do it? That's what you all have to answer for yourselves. But I would say, geez, just don't quit. Just don't quit. And come to grips with who you are and where you come into all this. I think when I think about this, I like to say that by the time you're in your late 20s, early 30s, I think you have an understanding of how much you want to do and to be comfortable with that. I have foster child. My wife and I adopted a foster child, which is a little bit like, maybe it's a stretch, but Ted was 5 or 6 years old when we fostered him. He had been in 7 different homes for adoption. It didn't work out. We had a sister too, same kind of story. And when I look back at their lives and what they did, I had to come to grips with who they are. And I had to come to a reckoning with what was good for them. And I think I did that successfully. So when I look at their lives, what was good for them was not necessarily what I would have envisioned. But, they both led pretty productive lives. One sadly passed away, had a heart attack and died, but the other is a nurse and doing pretty well. But that's a tough reckoning to make, whether you're a parent, foster parent. In our case, we adopted them along the way. That's going to be a tough reckoning. That's a tough reckoning for all of us. How do you do that? That's part of what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean you shoot the lights out. It means you come to grips with who and what you are, and you go on and you contribute wherever that is. If you're the quarterback on the football team, you make a lot of money and get a lot of fanfare. But you do pretty good if you're a guard and you do your job well. Maybe you don't make as much money. Maybe people don't know who you are, but it's still very, there's a big contribution to that. Sorry I went on about that, but it's a good question. Yeah.
You're in real estate. What's like the largest asset or like most valuable asset that you own?
The most valuable? Okay. Okay, first I'm going to say, to answer that, my view is I'd rather own 100% of something than be a partner in something. So I like to say I'd rather own a $10 million building or 10% of a $10 million building. Somewhere between 10 and 15 million would be the answer. And I'm primarily a developer. Sometimes we buy property. When I say we, it's my wife and I. So I have no partners other than my wife in these things. Sometimes we develop and own, just take it in and hold it. And sometimes we develop and sell. But I think a better question would be, not that your question's not good, that's today. The first one I ever made, first real estate investment, I was at Wharton, and I bought a building lot for $3,600. I was like you, really. I walked in off the street, I saw a sign posted building lots for sale called Frida Real Estate. And I walked in and, can you tell me about the lots? And they said, well, if you want to talk about the lots, you have to talk to this guy. And took me into a big office in the back. And there's this guy, his name's Joe Frida. The reason Joe Frida comes to mind is I do business now with his grandson.
Oh my goodness.
Today. But the big guy was back there. It was in Siena City, New Jersey. My parents owned a home there, summer home. My in-laws, we weren't married yet, they owned a place. So I went in and he said, well, we're building these lots. Back in those days, they used to take the silt from the intercoastal waterway, and they'd blow that in on wetlands. I know today that sounds like a horrible thing, but that's what they did back in that period. So the deal was, we signed a contract. After the roads were in, I owed a third. And when the utilities and whatever were in, I owed another third. And there was another contingency in there. I had to pay it off at that point. So I went into I'm talking to him, and I said, well, I don't have, I really don't have a checkbook. I didn't have the money either, but even if I had the checkbook. And he said, well, that's okay. What do you have? I said, well, a $20 bill. So he wrote the receipt out, $20. I held it. For some reason or other, they never billed me as those things advanced. I sold it about 3.5 years later for $12,000. But if you do the calculation, I held it with $20 for 3.5 years. And but the good news is I bought 2 more along the way when I could see what was happening. But my father-in-law at the time because he's now dead, but he looked at me and he said, what are you doing? That is a marshland. And I said to him, well, look, if there are 12,000 on that side of the road, and on the marshland side, there are 3,600, seems to me that. So that's the conventional part of what you're thinking about. When do you become a radical or a wacko? And when do you just use common sense? And how do you then extrapolate and go forward? So do you know what $1 million, if you take that $1 million, I had this goal when I was at Wharton. I wanted to be a millionaire. I had zero money. Today, that $1 million that I visualized that I did not have, today, that equivalent is about $11 to $12 million, adjusted for inflation. So, it's small. Yeah, it's going to grow. And yes, it took a lot of years, a lot of years for that to happen. That's why you got to play the long game. So you can do it. But keep the thoughts to yourself, because otherwise people will think you're a little bit off. Good luck.
I know it's a tougher question, but if you were to kind of specifically the real estate side, if you were to do that today, do you see the same opportunities in the real estate market?
Oh, yeah. But you got to think outside the, again, you have to see, if you see what everybody else sees, and in anything in life, you're going to get what everybody else gets. But if you can see in some realistic way what others don't see, I'll give you a real life example. My wife, I had emergency open heart surgery about 5 years ago. I didn't know I had a problem. Fortunately, it all worked out. Everything's fixed. But I did have emergency open heart surgery. About 6 or 7 months after I had that done, I was looking at a location where I had some investments, and I saw something offered for $1.3 million, $1.4 million. And I said, wow, I think that's a real value. But nobody else saw it that way. Now, fortunately, I was right. Today, I just, about 4 years later, I've developed the property. It just appraised at $6.5 million. I paid $1.5 million for the roughly $1.5 million, plus I have construction costs in it of another 1.3, less than $3 million. I just got it, and the bank has loaned the money on that. So, yeah, you can, but the reason why we don't is the conventional thinking gets in our head. And how do we know that conventional thinking isn't the wise thinking? And how do we know when it's not? Example, I can't get my head around crypto. Maybe it's my age. I bought my first crypto investments about 3 months ago. Tiny. I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did. We could really, but I will tell you this, that once I did that one that I just explained to you, there were 3 more that came up and I bought them all. I can't, and once that becomes the conventional thinking, once everybody sees what I've acted on, and I've been on the wrong side of that too, that's part of learning and understanding. But when I bought that $3,000 lot I explained to you, I said to myself, Tom, you will never have that opportunity again. And I said, the problem I had with that is I had no money. But I always told myself that if that happens again, do it. Just do it. I can tell you, I think with some honesty, that example that I gave you where I bought the one and got it going and made it happen, I always told myself, if I see that again, I've got to put everything on the line. And I did. As a matter of fact, I bought the 4th one just the other day. Well, it won't even close until January. So that's how, some things I have to live to be 80 and see something happen in my mind only 2 times. But I told myself if it ever happened again, I would do it. Here I am at 80 acting on it. I think if you can work for people and be inspired too by, you don't want to surround yourself with naysayers. You want to surround yourself with people who aren't crazy, but you do want to try to get to read about people who made things happen and try to identify the characteristics they have. Yeah.
What's your process of making goals for yourself?
Well, I always wanted to be rich, so it was always money. But I've written down objectives I have in terms of being a good human being, and to be aware that I don't want to achieve goals at the expense of other things. That I want it to be balanced, and I want it to be beneficial for my employees. There are issues that come up. I mean, sometimes I feel guilty that I've been able to do what I've done, and sometimes I think I should have shared more, and why don't I give away more and all that. I mean, they're very human kinds of things to deal with, but in my case, it was. And the reason is because I can't play the game if I don't have the money. So I need the money to play the game, whatever that means. Yeah. It's been my pleasure. I hope I've left you all with something, and I'm going to give away a few books. And I like to start with, do you know how many, it's not a trick question. Do you know how many times you can spend $1? Not a trick question. It's one time. Just one time. And every time I look at $1, I can only spend it one time. I can consume it, make myself feel good for a minute or two or a day. Wake up the next day and look at what I spent. So why did I do that? What am I going to do with it? How's it work? When am I going to get the 2 hours together to try to put it together or whatever? So you can only spend $1 once. And that's driven a lot of what I've done and not done. So I've had fun. I hope you have. I hope you've learned something. And Rick, it's always a pleasure.